There are two kinds of people who move to the mountains: those looking for peace, and those who show up with clipboards, contracts, and the kind of smile that makes your mailbox feel guilty. Guess which one pulled into my gravel driveway the day after I unpacked my last box? I thought I was buying solitude, wildlife, and a porch swing that wouldn't judge me for staying in pajamas until noon. Instead, I got Melody Stanton in a white BMW, armed with bylaws, bronze highlights, and an attitude that said, "Welcome to the neighborhood, now leave." Drop a comment below and tell us where you're tuning in from. If you love true stories with wild twists, sweet justice, and just enough HOA chaos to make your blood boil, go ahead and smash that subscribe button, because tomorrow's story, let's just say, it makes this one look like a neighborly bake sale. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Now, I'm no stranger to strong personalities. I worked in cybersecurity for 15 years. I've negotiated with hackers, ex-military coders, and one guy who insisted on speaking only in Star Wars references. But none of them prepared me for Melody, the HOA president of Pinewood Bluffs, a title she wore like royalty, if royalty came with laminated warning letters. She opened with a sales pitch so confident I almost checked my wallet. "Mr. Granger," she said, clipboard already drawn like a weapon, "in this market, remote cabins are liabilities. But I'm willing to offer you $98,000 0 cents cash and close in 48 hours. I blinked. I had paid $340,000 0 cents, and this woman had the audacity to offer me 1/3 and call it a favor? I almost asked if the BMW came with the deal. I declined politely. She didn't. The smile disappeared like a politician after election day. That's when the flash bulb of her phone camera lit up, snapping shots of my mailbox, my siding, even the barely visible solar panel on my tool shed. "You know," she said, "HOA guidelines can be particular." The tone was sweet. The message was, "You're not welcome unless you're for sale." That was the first moment I realized I hadn't bought a cabin. I'd stepped onto it, and Melody already thought she was 4 moves ahead. The funny part is, I came here to breathe, to finally sip coffee without the sound of traffic, open emails without anxiety, and live like one of those live, laugh, love mugs, but with fewer regrets. For 21 days, it was everything I dreamed. My business ran smoothly out of the spare room. The air smelled like pine and possibility. I even caught myself smiling for no reason, which is rare for someone raised on tech cynicism and bad coffee. But then Tuesday hit. I saw her again. Same white SUV, same legal pad, now parked 30 feet from my property line. She wasn't sightseeing, she was measuring. I watched her like you'd watch a raccoon sniffing around your back porch. Curious, cautious, already knowing it's going to cause trouble, she logged every inch of my landscaping like it was a crime scene. And when she left, she waved, that kind of wave that says, "Enjoy your last week of peace." People think HOA drama is about lawn heights and flagpoles. It's not. It's about control. And Melody Stanton didn't want my property. She wanted submission. What she didn't know yet, I don't do submission, I do systems. And I had just realized I wasn't in a neighborhood. I was in a war zone disguised as a cul-de-sac. It started with a yellow envelope taped to my front door like a passive-aggressive Christmas card. Inside, my very first HOA violation. Offense? Mailbox too high. 2 inches above regulation, apparently. The same mailbox the previous owner had for 12 years. I double-checked every neighbor's setup, like I was conducting a federal audit. And you guessed it, mine was the shortest on the block. But Melody, she wasn't after mailboxes. She was after momentum. A win on paper, a crack in the confidence. And once she got that envelope on my door, it was like opening the floodgates to bureaucratic insanity. If you've never had your lawn chair cited as recreational debris, you don't know war. The violations arrived like clockwork. My satellite dish, too visible. My outdoor lights, too bright. My shrubbery, too wild. And when I trimmed it back, I got hit for visible undergrowth disturbance. I was living in a real-life HOA episode of Survivor, except instead of competing for immunity, I was competing to keep my sanity. Every violation came with a fine, $150. 0 cents here. $300? 0 cents there. Nothing ruinous by itself, but together? They were adding up faster than Melody's Instagram followers. I tried appealing, got automated emails that sounded suspiciously like Melody talking to herself in third person. I began to understand how people just fold. Not because they're weak, but because it feels like arguing with a fax machine that punches you in the wallet. Now, being a cybersecurity guy, I don't exactly fold. I escalate. Quietly. I installed cameras, sensors, motion-triggered alerts, and a sprinkler system rigged to identify uninvited guests and gently introduce them to the laws of private property. I even coded the sprinklers to release a food-safe dye in bright, washable neon colors, just enough to make trespassers think twice and look like they lost a paintball tournament. The system was elegant, defensive, legal. Or so I thought. Because Melody, she wasn't just nosy. She was strategic. One step ahead, wearing pearls and carrying plausible deniability. She struck on a Friday afternoon. I was in town picking up groceries when I got a motion alert from my front door camera. I checked the feed and nearly dropped my eggs. Melody. Inside my house, with 3 friends, balloons, coolers, party gear, laughing, filming a tour on social media and calling my cabin her new weekend retreat. I stared at the screen like it was a horror movie with a laugh track. It was trespassing. It was insane. It was live. I tapped the app to trigger the defense system, and nothing happened. My sprinklers didn't activate. My alarms stayed quiet. My cameras began glitching like they were having a nervous breakdown. I knew that kind of silence. It wasn't malfunction. It was sabotage. And then I saw him. One of Melody's party guests, crouched near my router, tools in hand. A tech guy. My tech guy. Well, not mine, but a specialist. She'd brought in someone who clearly knew how to dismantle networks because my entire system was dark. She didn't just break in, she neutralized my counterattack. And then, like salt in a digital wound, they used my own system against me. Melody redirected the sprinkler output, not toward the intruders, but toward the neighbors. My neighbors. My innocent, barbecue-loving, porch-sitting neighbors. One by one, their patios, their cars, even poor old Mr. Sanderson's bird bath got hosed down in high-pressure Technicolor. Red, green, blue. Like Mardi Gras gone wrong. By the time I got back, Sheriff Clements was already there. Emergency services, too. Melody had vanished, of course, leaving nothing behind but confetti, soaked footprints, and a public relations disaster that looked like I'd launched an HOA-themed chemical attack. My security footage? Gone. My network? Fried. And my neighbors? Furious. The sheriff looked at me like I was the first lunatic she'd seen who rigged his house to paint the neighborhood. "Son," she said, citation pad in hand, "I don't know what kind of standoff you've got going with Melody Stanton, but this just made you the villain in your own story." And standing there, surrounded by chaos I didn't cause, but definitely couldn't explain, I realized she was right. Melody had turned my own defense into evidence, my retaliation into ammunition, my neighborhood into a courtroom. And I was losing. But even villains get a second act. Especially ones who know how to write code, make backups, and recognize the difference between defeat and setup. Because if Melody thought she won, she hadn't read the final clause. I was just getting started. 3 days after the great sprinkler incident of Pinewood Bluffs, also known as the day I accidentally redecorated my neighbors in neon regret, I found myself camped out on the front porch, trying to breathe through the weight of financial panic and community exile. That's when I saw him. Harvey Doyle. 72 years old, former mechanic, local mystery, and apparently the only man in the neighborhood who hadn't cursed my name since the HOA Chemical Carnival. He walked with the steady rhythm of someone who'd spent a lifetime listening to engines more than people, and he looked like he could still lift a transmission if you bribed him with black coffee and silence. He didn't say much at first, just sat down next to me in the same patio chair that Melody had labeled non-compliant recreational clutter and sipped from an oil-stained thermos like we were on a stakeout. He had that old man calm, the kind that either meant he was about to give me life advice or offered to bury a body. I hoped for the former, but honestly I was open to options. Finally he spoke. "You planning to fold like the rest of 'em? Or you got some bite under all that tech?" The question hit harder than any fine I'd gotten so far, probably because it was the first one that made me confront something besides bylaws and bank balances. I raised an eyebrow. "You sayin' there were others?" He gave a dry chuckle, like I'd asked if squirrels lived in the woods. "5. Before you. Same dance, different tune. Melody finds the ones who value peace more than property, pokes 'em till they bleed cash, then offers 'em mercy at a discount. And just like that, the narrative flipped. I wasn't a victim of random HOA drama. I was the 6th entry in a pattern, chapter 6, in a book called How to Steal a House with a Smile. Harvey reached into his weathered tote bag and pulled out what looked like every receipt and real estate transaction in the history of Pinewood Bluffs. Pages of listings, annotated printouts, emails, even a notarized letter from a family called the Wilcoxes. They got fined for having 2 lawn gnomes. Rules said 1 per yard. Melody said theirs had concerning facial expressions. I couldn't tell if he was joking, and that scared me more. The Martinez family, fined weekly until they repainted. Paint matched the approved shade. Didn't matter. She claimed it faded in an emotionally disruptive way. He laid it all out like a crime scene, and that's when I realized Melody wasn't enforcing rules. She was engineering surrender. Create enough pressure, apply it consistently, and watch the value crumble until her cash offer feels like salvation. It wasn't personal. It was business. Predatory, calculated, and entirely built on gray zones. Just close enough to legal to survive a lawsuit, but slimy enough to ruin lives. "She doesn't break the rules," Harvey said. "She bends them till they scream." I asked him why nobody had stopped her. "Because she never pushes just one person too far. She spreads it, 100 small cuts. You bleed out before you realize it wasn't random." He tapped his thermos. "And most folks, they didn't come up with firewalls and backdoor patches. They don't know how to fight something that hides behind paper." The thing is, he wasn't just giving me information. He was testing me to see if I was another retreat in the making or if I had the wiring to actually push back. Harvey leaned in closer then, voice low. "You're not just dealing with an HOA queen. Melody runs a business behind this curtain. She's connected, code enforcement, county clerk, maybe even a lawyer or two who owe her favors. She doesn't flip houses, she flips owners. And you, son? You're not just next, you're different. You've got eyes, systems, options. And if you're not afraid to get a little uncomfortable, I think you might be her first mistake." I didn't say anything right away, mostly because my mind was spinning faster than a corrupted router. He was right. Melody had a pattern, and patterns are systems. And systems? Systems can be cracked, but only if you can step back far enough to see the code and brave enough to write your own patch. The only thing I needed now was a partner who could translate HOA legalese into evidence. Someone who could help me turn this scam into a case. Someone who knew where the lines were and how to shove Melody over them. Before he left, Harvey dropped a final folder into my lap. "This one's got the good stuff. Property transfers, HOA meeting minutes, and a few complaints that never made it to the public record." He stood up like he'd just clocked out of a long shift. "She's not a neighbor, Elliot. She's a shark with a lawn chair. The question is, are you going to be bait or bait trap?" That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk with Harvey's folders spread out like a blueprint for corruption. It wasn't the fines that haunted me now. It was the stories. Families run out of homes they loved, forced to smile and sign before they broke. Melody had turned manipulation into an enterprise, and I couldn't be the next chapter. I had to be the footnote, the one that ruins the whole book. I knew tech, I knew systems, but now I needed someone who knew the law. Not the glossy stuff on HOA pamphlets, the real kind, the messy kind. Someone with the skills to dig deep and the nerve to stay dirty when it got personal. And just like that, I knew my next move. I didn't need to fix my reputation, I needed to flip the narrative. Melody thought she was untouchable. But sharks? Sharks don't do well when someone pulls the water out from under them. I wasn't going to fold. I was going to find someone who could turn her rules into rope. Someone who knew how to fight fire with footnotes. Murphy's Coffee House was the kind of place that served scones with names like Summer Nostalgia and played acoustic covers of songs that didn't need acoustic covers. It was also, at that moment, my refuge. I was tucked in a corner booth, half-heartedly pretending to look at real estate listings, wondering how much pride I could sell to cover legal fees. Melody had boxed me into a corner so tight I was about to list my cabin as slightly cursed but scenic. That's when she walked in. Clara Voss. Not a real estate agent, not another neighbor with a complaint, but someone who looked like she'd come to fix a system, not shop for one. She moved like she belonged in a courtroom or a thriller novel. Precise, composed, zero wasted motion. Hair tied back, blazer sharp, eyes that clocked the exits before ordering her coffee. She scanned the room and walked straight to me like she'd rehearsed the approach. "Elliot Granger?" she asked, already sliding a business card onto my table. "Clara Voss, legal researcher. I think you and I are fighting the same war." Now, I've seen all kinds of ambushes in my time, digital and otherwise, but this one disarmed me before I could blink. I didn't nod, didn't speak, just stared at the card like it might start glowing. She sat down across from me without waiting for an invitation, the kind of move that would normally trigger my boundaries. But her calm was different. Not pushy, just practiced. Like she'd done this enough times to know hesitation meant exhaustion, not resistance. "I've been tracking Melody Stanton for 8 months, she said, flipping open a tablet and navigating like her fingers were made of code. 12 confirmed cases, 3 counties. All the same pattern. Lowball offers, bogus violations, psychological wear and tear until owners collapse under the weight of fictional infractions. She doesn't buy homes. She buys hopelessness. Below market value, then launders it into profit. It took me a second to breathe. I'd been choking on paranoia for weeks, but suddenly it had a name, a pattern, a freaking spreadsheet. She showed me records, sale prices, violation timelines, transfer filings. Each case followed the same rhythm, like Melody was playing jazz in legalese. "This one," Clara said, pointing to a couple in Teller County, "lost $180,000, 0 cents, in equity after Melody pushed them through 9 months of aesthetic compliance warfare. Their mistake? A backyard swing set visible from the road." She looked up. She weaponized childhood joy. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt so darkly absurd. I didn't know where else to put the feeling. What stunned me most wasn't the detail. It was the precision. Clara didn't speculate. She presented. Organized, time-stamped, cross-referenced. She had invoices from corrupt contractors Melody had used. She had transcripts from HOA meetings that sounded more like mob conferences. She even had audio of Melody herself saying the trick is to make them think it's just easier to walk away. Clara paused on that one. "She's smart," she said, "but she's starting to believe her own myth. That's when they slip." Her voice didn't rise, didn't change tempo. It was like listening to a storm explain how it chooses where to land. I finally found my voice. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Are you one of her victims?" Clara's eyes flicked down, just for a beat. "My parents," she said quietly. "Nevada. Different HOA, same tactics. They lost everything. Retired into a dream that turned into a foreclosure. I left corporate law 6 months later. Been tracking predators like Melody ever since." She closed her tablet. Arlen nodded. I'm not here for pity. I'm here for patterns, and yours fits too well to ignore. She thinks you're done. I think you're the crack in her foundation. There was something about the way she said it, flat, factual, yet somehow fiercely human, that made me believe her. Not just that she'd help me, but that she'd win. And she wasn't just here for revenge, she was here for reform. And maybe something else. So, what's your plan? I asked, voice steadier now, like I'd just remembered I had bones. Clara smiled. It wasn't warm, but it was real. First, we reset your security. Air-gapped, local backup, no cloud. Then we collect every message, every notice, every drive-by she makes. We build the timeline, we document escalation, and then we lay it at the feet of the county DA. It was like hearing jazz for the first time after months of static. Structure in the chaos. Finally, a way to fight that didn't involve sprinkler sabotage and neighborhood shame. And if that doesn't work, I asked. She looked me square in the eyes. Then we take it public. Her whole empire runs on silence. We break that silence, she loses everything. HOA positions don't survive sunlight. I leaned back in my seat, exhaling like I hadn't in weeks. For the first time since Melody's BMW pulled into my life, I didn't feel like prey, I felt like a blueprint in progress. Over the next few hours, we mapped a plan. Clara took the lead like she'd been scripting courtroom dramas in her sleep. She wasn't flashy, she was surgical. She explained everything in plain language, which I appreciated since my brain was still full of fines and regret. She asked for all my digital logs. I handed over everything: camera data, network history, correspondence. She copied it to a secure drive like it was a priceless artifact. You built a good system, she said, almost admiring. Melody's mistake was thinking you wouldn't improve it after the first breach. I cracked a smile. That was her last clean entry. By sunset, Clara had moved into war mode. She set up a remote command center in my guest room, turned my living room into an evidence lab, and somehow convinced me that we were the calm ones. I watched her review documents while sipping cold coffee like it was fuel. She didn't ask about my schedule. She didn't need an invitation. She was all in. At one point, I caught her staring out the window at the mountains. Her expression softened just for a second. You ever think about just leaving? I asked. She looked over. Sometimes. But then people like Melody remind me why I stay. That night, she handed me a list of action items and a timeline. I read it like gospel. As I got ready for bed, she looked up from her laptop and said, "She's going to try one more move. She'll escalate, probably this weekend. Big, bold, theatrical. It's what predators do when they think the meal's about to run." I turned in the hallway, halfway to the guest room, and asked, "So what do we do?" Clara didn't blink. "We get ready," she said. "Because next time she steps foot on your property, it won't be a celebration. It'll be an indictment." Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp mountain air that makes you think anything's possible, like forgiving your neighbor or resisting the urge to rig your porch with surveillance-grade booby traps. But Clara and I weren't feeling sentimental. We were wired for war. Coffee in hand, eyes on the monitors, we sat in her rented SUV parked a half-mile from my cabin, watching our setup like mission control. Cameras, motion sensors, localized mics, redundant data backups. If Melody tried anything today, we'd catch it, record it, and prosecute it in stereo. And right on schedule, she arrived. Same smug BMW, same sunglasses that said, "I run this block." But this time she wasn't alone. 2 extra SUVs rolled in behind her, full of people hauling coolers, lawn chairs, and party trays, like they were about to throw a wedding reception for stolen property. Clara leaned forward and adjusted the mic input. "Here comes the victory lap," she muttered. Melody stepped out wearing what I can only describe as a gold-sequined blazer and white pants, the kind of outfit that dares someone to take it seriously while screaming for attention. "Welcome," she declared, "to our new weekend retreat." They weren't just trespassing, they were live streaming the crime. Melody walked up to my door with the confidence of someone who believed she'd already won. She pulled a key from her purse, illegally duplicated, of course, and let herself in while her friends whooped and hollered like real estate pirates. Clara hit play on our hidden speaker system. Out came her voice, crisp and clear. "This property is under legal surveillance. Unauthorized entry is a felony. Law enforcement has been notified." The group paused. Then someone laughed. Melody turned to the camera. "Oh, how dramatic. Someone's been watching too many courtroom shows." That was the cue. I tapped my phone and activated the sprinkler system. But this time, no fancy neon dyes, no digital failure. This time it was simple, pure, effective. Every nozzle erupted with a fine mist of skunk scent. Completely legal, totally harmless, and powerful enough to make grown men cry. The reaction was immediate. People screamed, staggered, slipped on the wet floor like slapstick extras. Melody caught a direct blast to the sequins. Her shriek could have shattered ceramic. I watched as her designer jacket darkened with the kind of liquid shame you can't dry clean out of your reputation. Within 30 seconds, the cabin looked like it had been fumigated by nature's cruelest prank. Melody stumbled out the front door, gagging and wiping her eyes, mascara streaking like road lines in a thunderstorm. And just as she hit the porch, Sheriff Clements pulled into the driveway with lights flashing. Timed perfectly, thanks to Clara's coordination. The sheriff stepped out slowly, taking in the spectacle, the stench, the screaming, the confetti-colored aftermath of karma. "Well," she said, pinching her nose, "looks like someone planned a party and forgot to invite the law." Melody tried to compose herself, but it's hard to deliver a power move when you smell like a trash fire in the woods. "Officer," she said, pointing wildly, "this man assaulted us with chemicals. It's a toxic attack." Sheriff Clements didn't blink. "Ma'am, we have video footage of you breaking and entering. This property is not yours. You are not on the deed. That's called criminal trespass." Clara stepped forward then, legal folder in hand like a holy book, and calmly handed over every piece of documentation. Proof of ownership, footage of Melody using a fake key, HOA complaints traced to her own handwriting. It was all there, tidy, ironclad. "You don't understand," Melody protested, her voice cracking under the pressure of failing theater. "I had permission." Clara didn't even flinch. "From whom? Yourself?" Then came the moment that cracked her entire circus wide open. Her friends started talking. First, Brad, the loud one who thought they were just there for a housewarming. "She said the owner agreed to sell," he cried, already backing away. "She said the security system didn't work." Then Melissa chimed in, practically in tears. "She promised we'd each get a cut once the title transferred." Even Tyler, the tech guy, confessed. "She paid me to disable the cameras. I didn't know she was going to live stream a home invasion." It was like a floodgate. The more they spoke, the faster the charges stacked up. Breaking and entering, conspiracy, fraud, evidence tampering. And all the while, Melody just stood there, skunk-soaked and shrinking, watching her empire crumble in front of a live stream audience that had tuned in for a party and ended up watching a public execution. Legally speaking, Ernest, bless him, showed up just in time with his handheld camcorder, wearing a gas mask and holding a thumb drive of surveillance footage he'd been compiling for months. "Figured you'd need the backup files," he said, voice muffled but steady. Heroic understatement of the year. Sheriff Clements turned to Melody and finally said the words we'd all been waiting for. "Melody Stanton, you are under arrest for criminal trespass, conspiracy to defraud, and unlawful use of a security override. You have the right to remain silent, though I doubt you'll use it." And as the cuffs clicked into place, Clara leaned over and whispered, "The scent of justice may not be sweet, but it lingers longer than perfume." Melody tried to shoot her a glare, but mostly just looked like a wet raccoon with better jewelry. The moment was perfect, but we weren't done. Clara had already sent the footage to 3 local news outlets, anonymized and time-stamped, labeled evidence of HOA exploitation. The DA's office received a neatly prepared digital packet an hour later. By evening, Clara had lined up 2 former victims to give statements, and I'd received a call from a civil litigation firm offering pro bono representation. Word was spreading. Melody wasn't just a rogue HOA president anymore. She was ground zero for a systemic investigation into small-town real estate manipulation. As she was loaded into the patrol car, Melody turned one last time, hair soaked and streaked, eyes wild. "This isn't over," she shouted. "I know people. I have lawyers." But her voice had no power left. It sounded like an old ringtone, once familiar, now just noise. Clara stood by my side, arms crossed, face unreadable. "She's right," she said. "It's not over, but it's our turn now." And that's when it hit me. Not just that we'd won the battle, but that we were about to change the entire game. The smell of skunk still hung in the air, but beneath it, the scent of something rarer. Consequences. 6 months after the skunk storm and handcuffs, the final court documents arrived on a windy Wednesday that smelled more like spring than fallout. Melody Stanton, once the HOA queen of Pinewood Bluffs, was now officially a convicted felon. 19 counts, 3 years in prison, 5 on probation, and in order to pay $2,700,000, 0 cents in restitution to the homeowners she'd shaken down like a petty tyrant with a spreadsheet. The headline should have been printed on confetti. I taped the notice to my fridge with a magnet shaped like a middle finger and poured myself a cup of justice-flavored coffee. The HOA, once a shadow government of fine, happy clipboard warriors, had been dismantled and restructured under court supervision. Harvey Doyle, yes, the retired mechanic, was elected interim president by unanimous vote. He never ran a meeting longer than 15 minutes and started each one by reminding folks, "You own your property, not the privilege of pleasing someone else's eyeballs." People started planting flowers again, real ones, with color. My mailbox, still exactly 2 inches too tall, received a formal apology and a free coat of non-compliant paint just for the symbolism. As for Clara, she was supposed to leave town 2 months earlier. Oregon had a fraud case waiting, something about a retirement community evicting seniors for luxury renovations, but somehow she kept pushing her departure back. At first, it was about organizing victim testimonies. Then she needed to meet with the DA again. Then she just didn't bring it up anymore. Her files slowly migrated from her rental into my guest room. Her coffee mug made it to the kitchen cabinet, and her dry humor made it into my mornings. We never had the talk. We didn't need to. She left her law books in the guest room. That said more than any contract ever could. One evening, while we sat on the porch watching the sun smear gold across the pines, she turned to me and said, "Do you ever get tired of being right?" I laughed. "Only when it takes 6 figures and federal charges to prove it." She tilted her head like she was memorizing the shape of the air. "You ever think you'd end up like this?" I shrugged. "Nope. I thought I'd be coating in sweatpants till 65 and yelling at squirrels for sport." I gestured toward the porch, the mountain, her. This wasn't part of the plan. She smiled, small, but it held everything we weren't quite saying. Plans change, good ones adapt. The next morning, just as I was settling into my new normal, a life without surprise fines or skunk tactics, I saw her, a woman at the end of my driveway. Black SUV, aviators, a clipboard and camera combo so familiar I nearly spit my coffee. She moved with the same quiet entitlement I'd seen in Melody, like the land owed her an explanation just for existing. She took a few steps toward my property line, eyeing the cabin like she was deciding whether to appraise it or condemn it. Old instincts flared up, my hands twitched toward my phone like I was still at war. But this time, I didn't panic. I stepped outside with a calm I hadn't earned last year. "Morning," I called, voice easy but sharp. "Can I help you with something?" She looked up, clearly surprised to be addressed like an equal. "Sandra Mitchell," she said, extending a business card. "Mountain View Properties. I was just admiring your cabin. In this market, you'd be shocked what it's worth." Her tone was friendly, professional, polished, but underneath, I could already hear the rhythm of the same song. Charm first, pressure second, coercion third. She just didn't know yet. She was hunting it to the wrong guy. I smiled, wide and clean. "Well, Sandra," I said, pulling out my phone and hitting record, "I'm not interested in selling, but I am very interested in how your company acquires listings in this area. Maybe you could tell me about your methods, your outreach strategy, your approach to properties owned by single individuals with a history of HOA conflict." Her expression shifted just slightly, like someone who stepped onto a porch expecting a doormat and found a bear trap. She blinked. "Oh, I wasn't... This isn't?" I held the silence until she filled it with retreat. "Maybe I'll come back another time," she mumbled, already backing toward her SUV. She didn't get the chance. Clara stepped out from the cabin, barefoot, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. "If she comes back," she said to me without looking up, "make sure she smiles for the camera. That way the state bar can put a face to the paperwork." Sandra didn't even ask questions. She turned, slid into the driver's seat, and drove off like the road owed her an apology. I stood there watching the dust trail fade into the pines, wondering how many people she'd scouted before hitting this property, wondering how many hadn't known what she really was. But I knew. And I was ready. I looked over at Clara, who was scrolling through case files while sipping my coffee like it was hers. "She'll be back," I said. Clara didn't look up. "Let her. Sharks swim upstream when the water's too quiet. It's their mistake." I nodded. "And what do we do?" Clara glanced over and smiled. "We don't swim, we anchor." And just like that, the cabin felt a little sturdier, the air felt cleaner, the past felt handled, and whatever came next, it would find us already braced for it. We didn't need fences to feel protected. We didn't need court orders to feel like we belonged. All we needed was clarity, a coffee pot, and two people who knew how to outlast predators, one motion sensor at a time. Looking back, I didn't just defend a piece of land. I reclaimed the kind of peace they don't put in property listings, the kind that comes from knowing you didn't fold, that you didn't let fear or fines or fake authority push you out of the life you built. Melody tried to turn my cabin into a transaction. Clara helped me turn it into a stand. And in the end, I didn't just keep my home. I found something better than solitude. I found clarity, community, and maybe something that feels a lot like a second chance, with someone who reads bylaws like bedtime stories. And here's what I hope you take from this. It's not just about winning. It's about not giving away your dignity at a discount. The rules matter, but so does the fight when the rules are used as weapons. This story? It started with a mailbox and a threat. It ended with a woman in cuffs, a town rebuilt, and a porch that finally stayed quiet. Not because we gave in, but because we stood up. So if this hit you somewhere real, if you've ever been bulldozed by a Karen with a gavel or cornered by a system that counts on your silence, then let us know in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from, and if you love stories like this, where poetic justice meets real people and the underdog walks out smarter, stronger, and just a little sarcastic, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, so you never miss what comes next. Because the next story, let's just say it starts with a tax lien, a fake HOA website, and a guy who knows how to weaponize a utility bill. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.